It's this little girl. Who is the annoying broad who's going, you don't know what she's...
So, guys, unfortunately, there's this clip going around the internet of this little girl who was at a Walmart and she started like trashing things. She started stomping on a packet of meat. She started to knock over, some confectionaries, looks like, Little Debbie's and all that. And she started to take like, like holiday wine or like sparkling wine, just to smash it on the floor, really. And there's been a lot of talking points about this, and I just wanted to give my opinion about this as well, really. So, like there were a bunch of people yelling, and they kind of said like, "Don't put your hand on her, don't put your hand on her." And then there was another video from another angle where some people are saying, "Oh, she may be autistic," and then there's also some people saying you don't know what she's been through, and a couple other things like that. So it's one of these things in our society where where there's a bunch of talking points. And I think the first thing that I will say is that, ultimately it's very unfortunate that this behavior occurs. But obviously, one thing that happens, we have to understand nowadays, is that behavior like this has been, since the dawn of human history. So obviously, with social media, there's more of an eye on this. So I think that, more people are very shocked by this, but it's also just understanding that there's a lot more just attention on it because of social media. And then the other thing about it is, like a lot of people are saying too, where's the parents? And I kind of agree with all that. Like honestly, what, if you had a kid and if there's two things about it, the kid has a behavioral issue, like they're just not on like any mental illness spectrum, like autism, and they're just behaving badly and discipline's the right answer, there should be consequences for this child. And then the other thing too is that if you have a child with mental health issues, and I do understand this is hard, but they cannot be, going in public and being dangerous to other people, like smashing things or, contaminating food or other things like that. If that is, what happens really, like it's a clear sign that this kid definitely needs to stay in a psychiatric ward and a couple of other things, so it's definitely like, a clear sign of, where are the parents? And I also will say that, there's also a couple of racial sides, like this is a little black girl, so obviously, I've not seen it on one news report, but there may be many news reports saying where's the parents, where's the father, and other things like that because of the stereotype that black children are out of control, or, like the stereotype that black men are not there for children, or single black women make bad parents. Like there's always those stereotypes. So sometimes, when you see videos like this, unfortunately people can be a little racist. And I do want to kind of just get into some things about this video. That first of all, what a lot of people don't know about stores is that they have policies, and the policies are really no employee can touch a customer, even if the customer's being violent or even the customer's shoplifting. There's a lot of multi-billion-dollar places like Walmart that will get you that can fire you, or somebody, let's say the parents of the child will be like, oh my god, somebody assaulted my kid. Even if they're trying to hold or restrain or even like hug the child, to kind of be like, okay, I'm putting my arms around you, you can't like move or whatever, like anything type of safe really. There's a lot of people that could turn that into a lawsuit, either against the store or against an employee, or even there could be a situation where an employee can get fired or even like charged with assault, and then everybody would be like, okay, this is just another situation of of Robin Hood, where somebody does something moral but they get punished for it type of thing, really. That's why people don't do that. It's another sign that, why Walmart needs a lot more security, or like why stores like that need to hire a police force to kind of take care of these situations. And there are police forces that know how to take care of minors or mentally ill minors, if that's the case of that. So that's one of the reasons why staff can't get involved, because you put your hands on somebody even if they're doing something violent in a store, as I said, you can get sued, or the police can actually. You can get sued. The store can get sued. You can get fired. There's a lot of contracts that will fire an employee for apprehending a customer, and and that's unfortunate, really. The other thing that I would say is that, there's the other thing where some people are saying, like she's autistic, you don't know what she's been through. So, there's problems with that as well, really. The first problem is that, number one, that having mental health issues does not keep you from consequences for your actions, really. I remember a few years ago, and I've said this many times on this channel, I did the 48-hour film project for New Haven, and I was being instigated by the city producer in a couple of emails, and I was going through a very hard time, so I had an emotional breakdown on stage, and it ended with somebody was screaming and yelling at me to shut up. And even though the person was teasing and antagonizing me, you know, I put myself in a situation where it didn't matter that I was going through a hard time or PTSD or, emotional immaturity or whatever, really. Like, people held me accountable for my behavior, really. And that all has to be for this girl, really. Like, if you're in a psychiatric ward and she was doing the exact same thing, did every type of behavior, like vandalizing thing, breaking glass, you know what they would do? They would do one of two things. They would pick her up and put her in a quiet room, which is like a closet where kids go in there, and they're not allowed to go out until their behavior stops. The next solution would be they would just take the kid and they would put them on like a board where your arms and legs are like kind of posted. And when they put you on under tight cuffs until you calm down. And then the third thing is that they'll restrain the kid. They'll get a couple of nurses to restrain the kid, inject them with a sedative, and then they pass out, really. And then they spend 1 or 2 days not being allowed to leave their rooms, really. And I've been in a situation too where I worked at a hospital, and there was this kid that was was trying to drink the Purell, and that's what they did. It was like 6 or 7 years old. They grabbed the kid each by an arm, and then they injected the kid with a sedative, really, because he was being dangerous to himself, really. And maybe, I hate to be mean, but maybe this little girl needs that, because there's two things about it. It is traumatizing, it is embarrassing, but then the conversation needs to happen with the little girl. Be like, okay, you know what, this is what's going to be your future if you keep this behavior. And it doesn't matter that you're autistic or not, or if people are saying that about you, because the other problem is that we live in this world where, unfortunately, if you have a mental illness, you are, unlike a lethal weapon, you have diplomatic immunity. You can do whatever the hell you want, really. Or there's a lot of sometimes there's parents that don't even punish. Sometimes there's parents that will say, okay, just let the behavior continue. Let's not remove the person. Everybody has to hold their patience, but that's just not how the world works, really. So you got to show consequence for people's behavior. It doesn't matter mental health or not, really, because the problem is, like I've said, it just encourages, future incidences. Like I said, what would happen if there was a kid who was part of the Special Olympics and they behaved violently in public and it was clear that they have issues? We have to hold people with mental illness responsible, because, the problem is that if you don't do that, then mentally ill people can do whatever the hell they want, really, and that translates to problems down the line. The other thing that I will say is that, some people are saying, okay, you don't know what she's been through. So, this is kind of a hard thing. Like, as I said before, and it kind of goes on with the mental health issue. What would happen if she was abused or sexually abused? What would happen if she, was in a household where, parents throw furniture, or from domestic violence and other issues, because, I remember, like, sometimes when my parents were upset, like, they would curse a lot, they would rampage, they would throw things or just knock over things and other things like that, and like I said, I have some PTSD from that. I have some trauma responses from that. But the other thing about that is that, again, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your condition is. It doesn't matter what you've been through. You got to just be, you just got to be in control of your behavior. And as somebody who's worked in psych wards, I've heard still horrible stories. I think, like, I've heard still horrible stories of sexual abuse. I've heard horrible stories of, some girls want to grow up, at 8 or 9 years old, want to be porn stars or strippers, so, man, maybe that, and I don't know their backstory, but I remember overhearing kids talk about that. But the point of it is that, it doesn't matter your circumstance. Just because you come from a bad circumstance does not give you the right to misbehave like that. And that needs to be enforced in children. Because, one big thing that's really messed up my life is I've always said that people have to understand that I'm a victim of circumstance. And I've learned in my early 30s, you don't do that. Just because I've had hard situations, I deal with discrimination, race discrimination, mental health discrimination, workplace bullying, sexual harassment, assault, PTSD, almost being murdered by the police just because I've endured all those things. It doesn't give me a right to go out and be an asshole and whatever. Really, it doesn't give me a right to do that. You know, and this girl has to understand that. The other thing that I will say is that I've been seeing a pattern, and I think the past couple of days of a lot of, maybe it's the Christmas season, but I don't know. But there's been a lot of just patterns of people showing bad behavior of children. And I do understand that sometimes things are staged, sometimes things are done with artificial intelligence, and sometimes, you don't know the backstory of some things. Like, this could be staged or this could be artificial intelligence or whatever. We don't know nowadays. But the big thing about it that I will say is that honestly, I think that we do have a problem in this country of filming bad behavior, and we understand why that is. That first of all, if you film bad behavior, look, this is on the news. This is something that's talked about. This is something that may have over 1 million views by the person holding up the cameras, So they can get their 1,000 subscribers. They can get that YouTube check. And maybe if they know of this girl and maybe she has bad behavior in public and other places as well, they can kind of do a video series of this girl's bad behavior or other bad behavior. There's money to be made with this. And then also too, I was watching a Instagram video of this girl who gets a laptop and her younger brother's jealous. Her younger brother takes his prime and pours it, and he's laughing his ass off. And it is a skit done by their parents, really, So, it's unfortunate that we're in the society where if you behave badly or you do offensive behavior where people say you need that belt or whatever, that seems to be rewarded. And I think that there needs to be a couple of things that YouTube needs to take down those videos, and Instagram, other platforms. They can say that it's criminal mischief. They can say it's delinquency to a minor. They can say it's actually bullying, or it's actually a form of child abuse. And part of that is, if I'm correct, it's delinquency to a minor when you record your kids behaving badly because you're encouraging a bad behavior, really. So I think that, platforms need to be smart about this. But I understand, like, as they say, if there's too much money to be made, they're not going to turn that off, really. And then the other thing, too, is I was watching a couple of videos yesterday on Instagram. You scroll through it. There's a video of his father taking an axe, really, and he's taking this axe, and he's, like, throwing it through a television, really, because the kid plays too many video games. Honestly, too, if a police officer watched that video, they can take that kid and put that in child protective custody. Oh, you're swinging an axe in front of your kid. You're using an axe to destroy property as a form of discipline. That could be interpreted as threatening or intimidation, really, or harassment. But there's the other side of, we all understand what he's trying to say. Cut the shit, stop playing the video games. But the problem is as I've said many, many times, is that, that should not be allowed or whatever, because it is as I said, it's giving attention to bad behavior. And then ultimately, as I said, you're using a weapon in front of your child. What's going to happen next is imagine if a dad takes out like a shotgun and blows like the television away, and like there's shrapnel and whatever, really. Like the thing about it is, it goes down to what I'm saying. It seems like, we live in a culture that, seems to profit off of monetize bad behavior, and platforms need to stop doing that. But they're not going to do it because there's too much money to be made. The next thing that I will say is that, that this is all bad for a couple of reasons, because one of the main reasons is that you don't know what's going to happen in the future. And one thing that can happen in the future is there could be a lot of people saying, you know what, maybe we need to get back to corporal punishment. Maybe we need to get back to, the granddad bitches Freeman day, the granddad Freeman from the Boondocks. Like, we need to get back to the days where we're whipping kids with a belt. Or just like James Amos and Good Times, where he was, I think the kid's name was Bumpy or whatever, where he was whipping him with a belt over and over, even though he wasn't his kid, because back then people believed that if you're babysitting a kid, you're part of the extended family, meaning that I can extend this belt to your behind. Maybe people like Donald Trump can like watch these videos and say, okay, we need to bring back corporal punishment in America, because it seems like kids need to go back to, being beat, because clearly if kids are so out of control, we need more conservatism. One conservative belief is spare the rod, really. And then also is spare the rod, spoil the child. And then also, when you look at Donald Trump and other politicians like him, how did they get elected? They got elected by a lot of people from other countries, from Africa, from people from the continent of Africa, people from Europe, people from Latin America, people from Asia. There's been a lot of like different groups of people who have immigrated over to the U.S. And in a lot of those countries, they do believe in hitting a child as a form of discipline. So he can kind of be like, okay, use that as a platform. In America, we need to get back to the 1950s where we beat the hell out of a kid, really, for that behavior. So, this type of behavior kind of says, okay, we need to get back to that society of beating the shit out of kids. Or the one flew over the cuckoo's nest, where in that film, it really talked about how people abused people with mental illness. And these videos can say, okay, look at this autistic little girl, look how much freedom she has. So we need to actually get back to, whipping a kid's ass back those days, even if they had a mental health issue. The next thing that I would say is that this also really drives the argument of artificial intelligence, because there's a lot of people that will say, okay, with artificial intelligence, Walmart's need to shut down. We need to have stores like Amazon. So what would happen if her parents, had a credit card, they put it in a machine, and then she did all this behavior at a Walmart or a store that's artificial intelligence? You know what would happen? They would charge the parents for everything that she broke. They would also charge, maybe a cleanup or a vandalism fee. They would also have the credit card information, so the billing address, and they'll be like, okay, you know what, maybe the parents need to go to parenting classes, maybe the parents need mental health evaluations, the daughter maybe need to spend 6 months or 8 months in a psychiatric ward, and part of the things could be putting her on medication, because we know like how hospitals make money by putting kids on medication. The other part of it can be actually, how should I kind of say this? The other part of it can actually be, teaching her positive reinforcement and all those behaviors. And then also she can have other issues as well, because, again, going to a psychiatric ward is like going to prison. You're around other people with issues, So there could be a kid that she rooms with, or there could be a kid like 2 rooms down that may be a sexual predator at 8 or 9 years old, and they may touch her, and then she has more issues. There's so many. Like but this warrants the argument of, okay, if people are vandalizing Walmarts, people can't control their kids. If people are not going to discipline their kids, if people are not going to step in and intervene, maybe we need to go to AI stores, really. And and Elon Musk and everybody would love that, because then you get rid of the employees, you get rid of the security, you get rid of all those people, and then you actually just have machines do it, and then you make so much bank, because eventually it's going to pay for itself, really. So all this kind of adds to the argument as well, artificial intelligence and all that. So I would kind of end it with two things. If I was a police officer, what would I do? Unfortunately, I would have to apprehend the kid or put the kid in handcuffs. That's what I would do, and walk her out just to embarrass her. Because I remember a few months ago, there was a story about this girl who steals her parents' car. She steals like a few $100s. She goes to like a Target, and the police were saying, we're going to let her finish her frap. We're not bad. Like, I would punch the police officers in the face if I ever see them, because, that's such negative reinforcement. And then people were like, wow, this little girl drove all the way in a car when she stole in the car. She stole, hundreds of dollars in cash, really. She went to a store by herself where people could take her money, or somebody could take her and, fuck her and violate her. But people are like, wow, she's this amazing little girl for doing all this stuff. And they didn't show a picture of her. Maybe she's white. And this little girl in this video is black. Because we also understand, a few years ago, what happened with LaMilton Tayshaun. He steals a car, wants to do hood rat stuff. People are criticizing his behavior. But there was a white kid who stole a car, and he was running into the house, really, and he thinks it's cool, and he's on like television shows talking about how cute he is, and I think he was even allowed to go to NASCAR and get like a ride around with the driver and all that. You see what I mean? That there's like there's racism in that, but it goes back to my point, really, of if I was a police officer, I would actually treat her fairly. I would say, okay, I would have her arrested, I would put her in cuffs, and I would just walk her out, and I would say, like, okay, well, here's the problem. Because, you're encouraging that bad behavior. And I don't care if I get fired or whatnot. I hope she learns that this type of behavior is not tolerated. And, if I was trying to charge the legal system, I would take it further and say she needs mental health evaluations. She needs to be removed from her parents for like 8 to 12 months to be put in a psych ward and all that good stuff, because, clearly Her parents need some counseling if they have a kid that behaves like that. This kid needs to learn some behavioral issues, and I don't think the parents exhibit control if it's gotten that far, really. The other issue that I would say, that unfortunately, if I was just someone in the store, I would walk the hell away, because the problem is, it's like what I said. If I did something like, and I'm speaking hypothetically, if I was Granddad Bitches Freeman and I whipped her ass with a belt, or if I was an abusive parent, I was like, okay, you know what, you like smashing glass bottles, I'll take this glass bottle and bash it across your face, so you understand that you don't like danger people's lives, really. So you understand, eye for an eye, really. You throw bottles at people, people can walk, slip in it, and get themselves cut in glass. You contaminate food. Maybe I should throw something at you so you learn respect, really. Um, I think a lot of people would think that, and a lot of people would think that you need to whale her ass with a belt. But I, as I said, I wouldn't do that because of the rules nowadays, which is, you put hands on somebody else, even if it's a child, it is assault, really. I work at a hospital. I know people who have good jobs, like work at colleges and hospitals, and other things like that. Oh well, my manager sees that, I get fired, even if there are people defending me and saying, okay, you know what, bring back old school discipline. You know, so it's unfortunate, but that's what will be my response, really. So it's just really unfortunate that this bad behavior happened. I really really hope there's a follow up where this girl is getting the help that she needs, but also part of that help needs to be consequences for her actions, because we can't live in a society where kids do whatever the hell they want, really. And also, if they have mental health issues, that the answer can't be, okay, understand their situation if they're from abuse, or understand their situation if they have a different psychology. There has to be consequence for your actions. If we don't live in a world like that, it's going to continue to be a world where if you have a mental illness, or if you're a child, or if people are afraid to discipline you, we live in a world where people can do whatever the hell they want, and that's not a world that is